I'm Jess. This is my channel, Chilling Like a Villain. This is a cup of tea, and this is also my March wrap-up. Malala by Malala Yousafzai and Patricia McCormick. She's a Pashtun girl who stood up for education in the Middle East and was shot in the head by the Taliban. And this is her story about that. And I have not read many memoirs, but this made me really want to read some more because it's just lovely and wonderful. It's very easy to read. It's not simplistic writing, but it's not dense writing, but it's still quite moving, even despite that. And I think it's also a really important book because it reminded me that she is a normal girl. That is a huge focus in the book, that she's just a normal teenage girl. She just happens to also campaign for very diligently for the things that she believes in. It's actually a very motivating book, I think, because it obviously speaks about how she feels lucky that she's able to go to school and that people take that kind of thing for granted. And I went into work the next day after reading this. I was really ready to work because I felt lucky that I could actually work and have a job. So it really sort of inspires you to understand more about your life and more about the kind of privileges you do have and not to take things for granted. Then because I read Malala and really liked it, I picked up another memoir, which is Lucky by Alice Sebold. I've had this on my shelf for genuinely years and just never read it, but I actually really liked it once I did. This is very hard to read at some points because it chronicles Alice Sebold's rape when she was 18. That's on the first page. So the rest of the book is her recovery and the reactions and the court case and that kind of thing. So it's all the aftermath, essentially, of this sort of horrible thing that happens to her. But because she does describe what happens to her, it's extremely uncomfortable in parts. So if you do have trigger warnings for rape or sexual assault or anything like that, I wouldn't pick this up because she does describe things. But I think that it was kind of important that it's disturbing and uncomfortable because you do kind of see it from her point of view. You see exactly what happened to her, and you then feel how awful it was. Well, not feel how awful it was, but you get a sense of how terrible this kind of thing is. I think that it's quite in depth compared to what we normally hear about, and it's also important to read because you actually see things like the court case and you see people's reactions to it, and you don't think that people actually would react like that, but they did. This was something that happened to her in the 80s, but some of the attitudes that are in this are still prevalent today and still around, which is just shocking. So I think it's really worth reading, and even though it makes you slightly uncomfortable, I think that that's almost a good thing, and I think that it's quite an important book and that it still has resonance today and will continue to do so until this kind of awful crime is put to a stop. Then I listened to an audiobook. I listened to the audiobook of Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This follows Dana, who in 1976, present day, gets pulled back in time by an ancestor to save him continuously. The only problem being is that Dana is a black woman and she's called back to the slave era. Octavia E. Butler is very famous, woman of colour, very famous in the science fiction genre, and I think this is supposed to be like one of the first sci-fi books written by a woman of colour, or published at least, and it was really good. It's quite fast-paced, which I was not expecting, but it goes quite quickly because she's called back over and over again. It kind of doesn't take long for her to get called back every so often, so it goes quite quickly. And every time that she goes back, the ancestor she's saving is a little bit older, so you see him throughout his life and you kind of see how his surroundings and the world that he lives in is impacting him, and how Dana, with her more modern views, is impacting him. So it's not necessarily a book about character development. There's not that much, especially for Dana, who is kind of sure of who she is anyway, but it does ask some really important questions, not just about racism, which obviously that is a very prevalent issue. It also asks questions about complicity and what we are willing to do to survive. Dana is sort of forced to be complicit in certain decisions that she would never ever normally make, except for the fact that she kind of has to, because otherwise some of the slaves might get hurt, she might get hurt. Essentially, a study of how people are a product of their times and a product of certain influences in their lives. So because I read all of these books within a week, 2-week period, I kind of hit a slump. I started so many books and I just wasn't feeling any of them. So DNF'd another book that I'm not going to go back to, which I will tell you about now, which is The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. I got 130 pages in and then I just couldn't. Book, if you don't know, it's quite famous on BookTube, but this book is about Leah, who runs away on her wedding day. She's a princess. She's being forced to marry a prince that she doesn't know, so she runs away. She's followed to a village by the prince that she rejected and an assassin. Only you don't know which one is which. Okay, this was good at the beginning. I was like into it. I wanted to know what was happening when she was right at the beginning, before she ran away. But then, once she met the two boys, it just seemed like all of her character was kind of focused on them. And okay, I only read 133 pages, but that was also enough for me to know that I really didn't like the format of how they were like not revealing who it was. Because she would meet these, she'd talk to them, they'd both have a conversation with her, and then it would be a chapter from the assassin where he said, oh, I talked to her then, and then it would be the prince and say, I talked to her then, and I was just like, they're going to do this every single time they have a reaction. This is what it's going to be for an entire book. And also, I didn't understand why the assassin didn't just murder her. Like, I'm sure that if he was a good assassin, he would have just killed her. I know that it's like a triangle kind of thing, and you don't know which one's which, and you wouldn't have a story, but it just seemed really dumb. Yeah, I DNF this, but I did skip to the end to see which one was which, and predictable. I heard there was a twist. I read it. Predictable. Then I read, or started at least, did not finish for a little while, Percy Jackson and The Lightning Thief. It was okay. It was just a little bit juvenile for my taste. I think I am going to read the rest of the books because my dad got me some of them, so I'm going to read them. I assume they're going to get better. Because I studied classics for a long time at school, it just, like, they would go into a hotel which was the Locust Hotel, and if you know the story of the Locust Eaters, you know exactly what's going to happen. So why would I be interested in that? I already knew not to trust them, and it was just like waiting for the characters to also understand that. Then, like I said, because I put that down and read it sort of in 2 installments towards the end of, picked it up again towards the end of the month, in between that, I read Crocodile on the Sunbank by Elizabeth Peters. This is what got me out of my reading slump, because that's why I put Percy Jackson down, because I was like hit by the reading slump, and this is what got me out of it. This is the first book in the Amelia Peabody series. Amelia Peabody is a 32-year-old woman in the Victorian era who inherits a lot of money after her father dies and decides to have an adventure and go off to Egypt. And so this was really quick, really fast-paced, very funny. It kind of has some mystery elements interwoven into it. Some of the things in this that happened in this felt a little bit rushed, but that is because I later found out that this was originally intended to be a standalone, so kind of things that would happen like in the 3rd novel happen in this one. So, and also that's why the mystery is not very well built up necessarily, and it's kind of predictable, but you're not really reading these. If you're reading them, you're not reading them for like literary prowess, you're reading them because they're fun. And I will definitely read the rest of them, even though there is like 19 of them. Isn't that hilarious? But this was meant to be a standalone and now there's 19. Yeah, also this was like the month of starting all of the series and not finishing any series, apparently. So at some point this month, Red Rising by Jackson Brown. This follows Darrow. Darrow is a miner on Mars. He lives underneath Mars with his wife, although he is like 16. And he mines for precious elements in Mars so that people can eventually come to Mars and inhabit Mars. Only through a series of unfortunate events, he finds out people in fact are already living on Mars and the Reds are essentially slaves underneath Mars. And he then infiltrates the colour system, the colour hierarchy of Mars and becomes a gold and basically is going to start a revolution. So most of this novel is set in this kind of Hunger Games-esque place where all these different houses that the golds are sorted into like compete and fight with each other to win, just to win basically for a year. So there was a lot of war, and I did not think that there was going to be that much war, but there was. I kind of liked it more than I thought that I was going to. It was a bit different from what I was expecting the book to be about, so it wasn't too jarring so much because it was kind of interesting. I really liked seeing Darrow being very strategic and being very smart. So, and I also liked that he, throughout the course of the book, he is more gold than he thinks. He's determined to be a red, but he's actually got a lot of gold elements to him and very darker elements that slowly come out throughout the book. And I think that that's going to be really interesting to explore in the later books because it kind of questions his essential identity. And I also really liked his and Mustang being his love interest, their kind of build up, which is kind of slow burn, and I think that it's going to be really good because it felt quite realistic when you're reading it. It wasn't insta-lovey, it was just sort of slowly built up, so I think that that's going to be really good once I get further into this trilogy. Then I read an ebook and I read Queen of Babel by Meg Cabot. I really love Meg Cabot, so I picked this up because I thought it was going to be really light. This follows Lizzie Nichols, who goes to England to see her long-distance boyfriend, kind of finds out he's not what she thinks he's going to be, so she goes to France, where her best friend is staying, and gets into lots of adventures and romance there. The other point of this book being that she cannot keep a secret and she talks a lot. She's a motor mouth, so that kind of gets her into a lot of trouble. I kind of didn't get that so much with it. I just felt like that was somewhat to be put in there to be a plot point, but I didn't actually feel like that's what she was like, because a lot of the time when she said all this crap that she was saying, it was a bit stupid. Like she seemed very oblivious. Like you kind of would know that you're not meant to say certain things, but she didn't seem to understand that she shouldn't. That being said, they're very cute and very fluffy, which is why you read Meg Cabot books, and I liked it for that reason. I'm probably not going to carry on with this series though. Not because it was a bad book, but because it's a trilogy. But I'm kind of okay with like where it ended. Like I'm fine. I don't need to read anymore. I will see you again soon.